It is such an honor to host you. As I mentioned in the introduction, your episode was the #1 episode that we did as far as downloads last year. I think that says something to the amount of your knowledge and the way that you can speak to things and make things very easy to understand. To return the favor, I wanted to be the first one to come onto the show and inform you of something that just happened around here. You live in New Zealand, so not too close to the United States, and it happened here. So I wanted to warn you. I am blessed to get research from the American Heart Association. If you haven't heard of them, it's a wonderful organization that has our best interests at heart, literally at heart. And I just wanted to let you know that based on an abstract, that if you do intermittent fasting, you have a 91% increased risk of deaths by heart disease. I wanted to tell you personally, I know you typically only eat one meal a day, so I hope you take that to heart, literally take it to heart from the American Heart Association and change your behavior so you don't die and we can keep doing these.
Or we could talk about what's wrong with that study.
Study?
It wasn't, well, first of all, it wasn't a study. It's not yet a study because it's actually not published. These are unpublished observations that are being spoken about here. It is in a non-representative group of individuals for the general population. It's a special population. And at the end of the day, none of these kind of studies have the capacity, the ability to inform us on risk, hazard, cause, effect, or anything similar. These studies are actually not even science, even the ones that do eventually get published. This is tribalism, this is patch protection, this is propaganda, this is smoking, this is anything but science. So I would warmly recommend that folks with more than about 3 brain cells ignore absolutely everything that such organizations, including the AHA, have to say on any topic, actually. Anyway, there you go.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. I just got back from the Collaborative Science conference in Las Vegas that was held by Dave Feldman. The primary topic of discussion was all about lean mass hyperresponders and cholesterol. And being inside a conference room where everybody is extremely careful with how they word things, what we know, what we don't know, what this study says, what this study absolutely does not say, being so careful about some of these things, to then come home and see something like that, like it almost made me like reminisce the days of like the World Health Organization coming out and saying that like meat caused cancer, because you actually had to like dig into the data and understand like what hazard ratios were. Like you had to do at least a little bit of work to show how stupid these things are. This one's like nothing. They're getting worse and worse. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Discipline in science is one of those things that when I first started in science some 2.5 decades ago, it was there. It was what I was taught. It was still the thing. It was still the way science was done, as far as I could tell from what I was being taught at the school I was at. Steadily, from that point forward, it seemed to be an erosion of the scientific discipline over time, to the point where about 5 years ago, when I decided that was the end of that for me and I wasn't going to be involved in this industry anymore, that university learning had turned from the bastion of knowledge production, discipline, all of that, into something else entirely. It had been taken over by a certain sector, shall we say, of individuals who think of themselves as progressive for some reason, when actually what they did is regress science several thousand years.
Yep.
To the point now where, you know, it's difficult to get sense out of most scientists, actually, even. So we're better off without it.
Better off without that. Thank you very much. So recently you made actually 2 appearances. I just learned today of your second appearance on the Ultimate Health Podcast with Jesse Chappis, kind of a mutual friend of ours. I loved the first episode that you did so much that I wanted to reach out to you to host you again to talk about some of the topics that you expressed. And I have to say, the thing I liked the most about it was, as you were talking about the benefits of a carnivorous diet, you drew a hard line by saying, like, this is a species appropriate diet. We need 0 carbohydrate or non-animal foods in our diet. And my personal diet is 90 to 95% that diet. And I thought, like, okay, well, he's making such a strong stand on the fact that we don't need anything else besides animal products. Yet you also said that your diet is not 100%, it's about 90 to 95%. And I was curious by that. And the way you presented it was, look, I'm a human too. I would love to be 100%. You certainly have. And I definitely want to talk about that today. But I love the fact that you said, these things are around. I do like to dabble in some of these things. I know it's not the best for me and I do pay the price. I thought that was a really genuine and open way to discuss your own personal diet. I think it's very authentic. So I wanted to applaud you for that. And maybe you could comment on that. There's a little bit of a dissertation there, or I'm sorry, a dissonance there where like you believe one thing, but also it's not that easy to actually do that one thing 100% of the time.
Right. That is true for myself. I am hardwired as a hedonist. It's been in my personality structure from day one. I also express a certain form of autism, which is known as the demand avoidance kind of autism. And the way that presents largely is that if anybody tells me I must do such and such, including me telling myself I must do such and such, then I'm going to run away and do the opposite thing, at least to some degree. It is a flaw. It's an absolute flaw, and I wish it wasn't part of my personality structure. I wish I could adhere 100% because the health benefits of being 100% versus 95 are actually vast, hugely more than the 5% penalty for the 5% transgression that you might expect. It's completely unreasonable. That said, there are people that I could point to that I know personally who absolutely are 100% and do adhere and don't have a problem doing that. Their personalities allow them to do that. And all we can do is look up to those folks and try and emulate them as best as we can, I think. But I'm not going to turn 52 years of life experience around and change my entire personality structure within just a few years that I've really been thinking about and trying to do the carnivore diet 100%. So, yeah, I think it was important for me to say that publicly and be authentic because a lot of the people running around saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do the other thing, otherwise we'll come for your card. You'll have to hand in your carnivore card. You never really were a carnivore. You did it wrong and you need to be publicly named and shamed. I wanted to head that off by saying, look, I'm telling you what is ideal as far as I can tell based on my quite extensive knowledge of human physiology, etc. However, I'm not claiming to be doing this exactly. I'm claiming to be getting close. You need to know that. And really, that's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. And I think you're right in the sense that we talk about carnivore and we forget that not everybody thinks or knows that we are talking like you have to only be beef, salt, and water all the time. Like there are steps that you can take, and your progression was very similar to my progression. Like it doesn't start with I'm going to be ultra strict. I'm just going to start to kind of like understand this low carbohydrate thing and see where that leads, and eventually it leads to something that becomes a little bit cleaner. It's possible in the beginning, but it gets there over time. And so last time we had you on, we talked a little bit about your interest in nutrition and how that led. I want to know this time about your progression through nutrition and how you yourself are feeling, because I've heard you say that taking that last step to 100% carnivore, your health improved vastly. I'd love to hear about that, but also like what steps along the way of your diet progression helped you in your own personal health?
Right. So right throughout my childhood, adolescence, and most of my adult life, up to probably about age 38 or so, I was consuming, well, when I was a child and an adolescent, I was consuming a standard diet because that's what we did, that's what we knew, that's what my parents knew, that's what they fed me, so that's what I continued to do when I left home, etc. This is all before I undertook any training, by the way. Then the ketogenic lifestyle approach had a new blossoming. It was enjoying being in vogue, if you like. I think it was about 27 years ago. something like that. And I came across that, and being the sort who was hardwired to do the exact opposite of what he'd been told to do, obviously I grabbed it with both hands straight away and said, right, let's do this. To that point, I had suffered with nearly every digestive disorder and problem you can probably name or think about at some point. Plus, my mental health was absolutely in the can and had been for years. We're talking severe bipolar, depressive tendencies. At one point, I had agoraphobia, believe it or not. For a year, I never left the house.
Wow.
People don't know this about me. It's not something I talk about a lot, but I have spoken about it. All of that, it seems, was underpinned by the toxicity, the inflammation, the immune reaction to feeding myself plant materials. When I went to the ketogenic approach, much of that material and much of the material that was particularly problematic for me had been removed from my diet. And coincident with that was an improvement in my digestive health and my mental health. The other thing I forgot to mention was I had severe fibromyalgia as well, whole body.
Wow.
Which was quite debilitating as well. All of that kind of improved 80% on the ketogenic approach. Wind forward a few years to when people started talking about the carnivore diet. That was another thing that immediately made sense to me. Oh, wow, I wonder why we didn't think of this before. Of course, I had to check it out. Are these people telling the truth about the anthropology that underpins this? Are humans really adapted and evolved to eating a diet consisting of almost entirely meat and fat? Turns out the answer was yes, absolutely unequivocally, without any question. I'm in. Well, I'm in 95% because it's me. So that was kind of 9 years, I think, that I've been taking that approach. And over that time, my health has improved again quite significantly. But there is that gap between where I know my health can be and where it is on the basis of my ongoing behavior status. And as you alluded to, Casey, there have been a couple of periods where I've done, for example, 90 days, 100% adherence for a challenge to make a series of videos or to help out my friend Coach Raymond with his getting across his message to people and all of that. And yeah, the results of that have been stunning. People can look at those on my channel. They're there for people to see if they want to. So that was kind of my pathway. So really, to summarize, going from a position of every digestive disorder and problem you could probably think about, whole body fibromyalgia and poor mental health, to where I am today, I think it's miraculous.
Yeah, it really is. And you would think it was a miracle had you not heard this story repeated over and over and over with all these anecdotes that are piling up everywhere. It's quite remarkable. I'm so glad that you mentioned Coach Raymond, mutual friend of ours. I got to meet him last year in person. He's a really great guy. One of his concepts is kind of what you're talking about here, which is priming. And I guess kind of Coach Raymond's idea is that when you're basically coming from any diet to a carnivore diet, you might be pretty much devoid of nutrients. Can you talk about your interpretation of priming and what your experience was like when you tried it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that don't know, here is what priming is. You would take the volume of meat and fat that you would eat as 100% carnivore in a 1 meal a day situation, your whole food for the day. And instead of eating that once, you'll eat that 3 and 4 times. You're basically fooling yourself to rifting. And you do that for up to 2 weeks before you kick into the next part of Raymond's program. And you've alluded to it. The reason for it is because most people coming from even from a keto background or even from a sort of dirty carnivore background or whatever, most of those people actually are expressing quite significant nutrient deficiencies. And so what Raymond's really doing with this priming is giving the person a 2-week period of what is ostensibly overfeeding to ensure that all the nutrients a person needs are on hand for the next part of the program, which does involve some fasting, by the way, full body recomposition. So during the 2 weeks of priming, the experience of it is, you'd think, wouldn't you, that you can eat all the food you want. There's no limit. You'd think, hallelujah, that's fantastic, wouldn't you? It's not fantastic. It's horrible. It's unpleasant in the extreme to be packing your body so full so many times a day with meat and fat. By the end of it, I was feeling like, if I never see food again in my life, that'll be just fine. Obviously, that's not true, but that's how you feel. That's how I felt, I should say, at the time. However, it did allow me to have everything I needed on board in terms of nutrients and to go forward and do the fasting stuff with absolutely no challenge or problem whatsoever. That was easy as pie because I wasn't suffering physiologically. I had everything I needed. Now, a lot of people that prime will gain a few pounds during that 2 weeks, obviously, because you're eating a lot of food. Some people don't. Other people actually lose weight priming. So there goes your calories in, calories out thing, by the way, if you wanted to get to that. 2 weeks of eating 4.5 times and more, because there's snacks as well in between, eating that much food by calories in, calories out, you've got to get fat during those 2 weeks or put some fat on. There's no two ways about it because it's the first law of thermodynamics, isn't it? Well, turns out it's not, because the first law of thermodynamics does not apply to an open system. It's specifically formulated to a closed system. That's why it doesn't apply. In actual fact, the thing that controls your body composition largely is your inflammatory status, your endocrine status, your hormonal status. And all of those things are guided in the right direction by eating the right kind of food, even too much of it.
Yep.
So what happens is you become anti-inflamed, or the inflammation that you're carrying drops off. Part of the process of being inflamed chronically is you hold a bunch of water. Your body just goes, whoosh, gets rid of it. So people say, oh, well, you lost water weight. Ah, yes. But I also had one of those biometric impedance scales. They're relatively accurate. They're not, research quality, but they're okay. So plus or minus. Anyway, here's what it told me. It told me that in that 2 weeks, yes, I lost about 15 pounds. 12.5 of that was water, but the rest was fat. Despite consuming well over 4.5 times my usual amount of so-called calories.